Liberals in Denver hate President Trump's deportation crackdown, so now they've come up with a way to fight back. And the Washington Post says that it was surprisingly simple. Here's the backdrop. When an illegal immigrant is busted for a crime, the federal government requires that ICE be notified if the crime carries a sentence of a year or more. So here's what liberals in Denver did. They rewrote their laws. Many of the crimes that used to trigger ICE notification will no longer carry a sentence of a year. See? Surprisingly simple. Crimes like shoplifting and trespassing will be punished less severely. Serve a few months in jail and you walk. But under the new approach, the sentences for domestic violence and simple assault have also been reduced. Only repeat offenders would be sentenced to a year or more. So you get that? To protect illegal aliens from deportation, liberals in Denver just gave all first-time domestic violence offenders a break. A guy who beats his wife or girlfriend now serves less time in jail. He might even be able to get away with it twice, depending on how repeat offender is defined. Now, if he happens to be an illegal alien domestic abuser, Denver liberals want to make sure he's not deported so that he can stay here and do it again, all so they can claim victory resisting Trump. See? Surprisingly simple. You just cave your own culture. Well, the University of Maryland selected top student Xu-Ping Yang to deliver remarks during last Sunday's commencement ceremony. Her speech created an international uproar. She said that people often ask why she chose to come to the University of Maryland. Her response was fresh air. Ms. Yang revealed that in her hometown in southwest China, the air was so polluted that she had to wear a face mask every day. She described her arrival in America as breathing air that was so sweet and fresh. She said that she would be forever grateful for the fresh air of free speech that she found at the university because she grew up believing only people in authority could define the truth. The right to free speech on college campus, she said, is a right worth fighting for. It's amazing she thinks that it exists there. Anyway, her remarks went viral. For telling the truth about her experiences in America, Ms. Yang was vilified. Millions on Chinese social media denounced her. Some warned her not to come home. She later apologized, saying she hadn't intended to demean her own country, the Chicoms, which she loves. Ms. Yang revealed more than she perhaps realized. Radical environmentalists have convinced American kids that our country is wallowing in pollution, but it isn't. And the fresh air of free speech that Ms. Yang is grateful for, it's under constant attack from the politically correct left. And yet it is worth fighting for, as she is doing. Well, lately, members of the Democrat Party establishment have been walking back the impeachment word. They know how unhinged their base is. They know the Russian collusion story has no evidence. But apparently, Auntie Maxine hasn't gotten the memo. California Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's become a folk hero to lunatic Trump haters everywhere, is still stoking the impeachment fires. On a little-watched morning cable news show, Maxine Waters declared that Vladimir Putin was actually the mastermind behind the nickname Crooked Hillary. Congresswoman Waters said that it was Vladimir who fed Trump supporters the "lock her up" chant. She said that these strategies were developed inside the Kremlin, working with the Trump campaign. So the words coming out of Trump's mouth were from Putin's playbook. Auntie Maxine said, "I think that there was a cooperation in developing strategy about how they could ensure that Hillary Clinton was not elected." When asked if she had an iota of proof of anything that would support what she said, any evidence at all, Maxine Waters was forced to admit, No, there is no evidence. She has nothing but a cockamamie theory dancing around in her head. There's a lot of room for it up there. One thing, though, that crowd chant at the Trump rallies, CNN sucks, that was a lot of fun. And you got to give Putin props for coming up with that one. That one I'll take. That one I'll endorse. Earlier this month, Aetna pulled out of Obamacare in Virginia. They're losing too much money. Other big insurers are also leaving, like Humana. They announced they're getting out of all Obamacare exchanges next year. So guess who the left is blaming? President Trump. After Aetna's announcement, the president tweeted 2 words, death spiral. After Humana's declaration, Trump posted Obamacare continues to fail. Those 2 statements, says the New York Times, nudged Obamacare downward. And they're not just blaming Trump. All the opponents of Obamacare have supposedly contributed to the problem by making self-fulfilling prophecies that Obamacare would fail. They kept saying it was going to collapse, and now thanks to them saying it was going to collapse, it is. Meanwhile, the next big legal hurdle facing Obamacare is subsidies. Federal court has already decided that the law's cost-sharing subsidies are not constitutional. Liberals are demanding that the Trump administration appeal that ruling. See, the liberals know that Obamacare will be dead in the water if the earlier ruling stands and subsidies go away. So they're already laying the groundwork to blame Trump if that happens. So Obamacare was designed to fail with no outside help. It was built on lies. It was unsustainable from the get-go. It's been in a death spiral since the day Obama signed it. They, and only they, are to blame. But what's happening is exactly what they want to happen. This is how you get to single payer. It's unbelievable here, folks, but many Californians have finally had enough. Ever since Democrats gained a supermajority in the state legislature there, they have endured continuous tax increases. The straw that broke the camel's back, massive tax increases on gasoline and diesel fuel, the highest taxes in the country. Freshman Assemblyman Josh Newman actually is facing a recall effort for supporting these higher taxes. So Governor Jerry Brown was in Orange County to defend Newman. He promised the freshman tax raiser all the resources he needs to keep his seat. And then the governor dropped an F-bomb. Governor Brown said, the freeloaders, I've had enough of them. He was talking to taxpayers leading the recall who are tired of tax increases. Think about that. Jerry Brown and his Democrats have done nothing but raise taxes since they've been in office. It's never enough, though. Whatever they get, they spend, and then they spend more. And if you object to having your pocket picked, you're the freeloader. You pay for this multi-billion-dollar high-speed train to nowhere. You pay for every illegal alien claiming sanctuary in the state, including medical, food assistance, and health care. Instead of fixing crumbling dams, you have to pay for social justice and climate change. And you're a freeloader. Yet to Governor Brown and liberals in blue states everywhere, it's you taxpayers who are held in contempt. These Democrats are parasites, and to make it worse, they're ungrateful parasites to boot. A lady by the name of June Chu is a dean at Yale. She has a doctorate in social psychology. Her biography touts her long career helping students, not just academically, but supporting their multifaceted identities. Now, recently, Yale students stumbled upon one of Dr. Chu's multifaceted identities hidden on social media. In a review of a local restaurant, she posted, "If you are white trash, this is the perfect night out for you." The Japanese eatery was not authentic, so it was for low-class folks. After slamming a gym employee, she wrote, "I don't care if you lose your job. I'm sure McDonald's would hire you." And this one, she called local movie theater employees barely educated morons trying to manage snack orders for the obese. Well, after the Yale Daily News published her scathing reviews, students and alumni of the prestigious elitist university were horrified, supposedly. Dr. Chu deleted her social media account and apologized. She says that she's learned a lot about the power of words. She says her posts demean the values to which she holds herself. In other words, the racist, bigoted person who wrote those racist, bigoted views, that's not the real Dr. Chu. Anyone else would have been fired, but Dr. Chu won't have to apply to McDonald's because Yale placed her on leave until things cool down. That's the multifaceted identity of liberalism. You talk one game, you play another, and you get away with both. Well, folks, I guess it was only a matter of time. I guess it was inevitable. 37-year-old Erica Anderson, recently a bride. Her New York City wedding was picture perfect. She wore a beautiful white dress. She walked down the aisle with a bouquet of flowers with the Brooklyn Bridge and the New York City skyline behind her. And it was time for Erica to take the big step, which she did willingly. She took her wedding vows with herself. That's right, my friends. She married herself. Sologamy is what it's called, sologamy. Ms. Anderson's part of a new and growing trend called sologamy. Happy Bride later discussed her big day and what it meant to her. I would describe it as women saying yes to themselves, she said. It means that we are enough, even if we are not partnered with someone else. Is it Ms. or Mrs. Anderson? I don't know. Whatever. She revealed that she had gotten tired of friends and family asking when she was going to get married. So in front of them, she tied the knot to herself, by herself, with herself. Now, before you brush this off as pathetic or the ultimate expression of narcissism, here's the thing. Mrs. Anderson is not alone, in a manner speaking. Businesses have sprung up eager to help sologamists create their perfect wedding day. Some companies sell wedding kits. Others provide typical services like photography. The trend is not going away. As for Mrs. Anderson, I hope she had a heck of a honeymoon. Folks, there is a radical feminazi website out there that's not doing well. They're treading water financially. They're holding a last-ditch online fundraiser to try to keep the doors open. I'm not going to tell you what they are because I don't want to help them. I just want to tell you these things. The CEO is bragging she's a person with multiple marginalized identities. Now, this website announced that if they don't get big bucks by the end of May, it'll be too late because scary financial trouble threatens their all-important work. What is this all-important work? What is so valuable to society that people should reach into their wallets and bail this outfit out? Well, their homepage gives you an idea. Here's a headline: Healing from Toxic Whiteness. Another title, A Guide to Self-Care When Your Loved Ones Don't Support Your Activism. And my favorite one is this: 5 Ways Mexican Queerness is a Radical Act Against Colonialism and Machismo. Now, you remember the Temptations had a big hit in the 60s, Ain't Too Proud to Beg? Well, that could be these feminist theme song because they're begging hard, so to speak. They complain that it's a terrible challenge to create intersectional feminist media in a financially sustainable way, especially in a world that does not value what they do. Ladies, girls, it's whatever you are, if the world doesn't care what you do, why should they support it with cash? No wonder you're losing your shirts, or worse, because you've already lost your minds. What about your panties? Have any left? The Trump administration's enforcing the law, and liberals are ticked off. Last week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued a memo ordering federal prosecutors to pursue the toughest sentences allowed under the law for drug offenses. Now, this simply returns the Department of Justice to normal. It's how the DOJ operated before Eric Holder relaxed the policies with a memo of his own. The Attorney General said it's a core principle that prosecutors should pursue the most serious charges available under the law. Doing so is moral, it's just, it's the right thing to do, and it'll produce consistent outcomes. Sessions allows some wiggle room. If prosecutors don't think the toughest sentences should be applied in a case, they can explain their decision to his office for approval. Now, predictably, the left erupted. Drive-by pundits accused Sessions of racism. They claimed enforcing the law will hurt minorities and lead to overcrowded jails. Eric Holder slithered out of whatever rock he was hiding behind to call Sessions' directive dumb on crime. Holder said that Sessions' memo threatened the stability of the criminal justice system and was a 20th century failed ideology. But look, after 8 years of Obama and Holder's ideology, an opiate epidemic is sweeping America, the likes of which has not been seen since the 1970s before tough measures were put in place, which the Obama regime removed because they failed. They were dumb on crime and got more of it. Sessions is simply fixing their mess. Donald Trump has proposed comprehensive income tax reform, massive tax cuts. And, of course, the opponents are out in droves saying it's a disaster, it won't work, it's a tax cut for the rich, it's not going to help the middle class, it's not going to help anybody. Matthew Dowd, token conservative at ABC News, used to work for George W. Bush, by the way, said there's no evidence that cutting taxes benefits the middle class. Well, try this, folks. From 1982 to 1989, real middle-class incomes grew by 12.6%. What was happening between 82 and 89? Reagan was president. There were 2 massive tax cuts, 12.6% income increase. In 2000, it happened again, early 2000s. The Bush tax cuts resulted in per capita real after-tax income rising by over 11%. Now get this statistic. Middle-class income grew by 36% from 1979 to 2007. Now, let's see, 1979, Jimmy Carter leaves, Reagan takes office, creates a boom that lasts all the way through Clinton and then the George Bush tax cuts. Tax cuts help everybody, especially the middle class. Don't believe anybody who says otherwise, because the facts do not lie. I mentioned it the other day. We're hearing reports that Donald Trump's wall is a laughingstock among the Republican establishment. They say it's never going to be built. Meanwhile, another story is unfolding. Democrats are not laughing. According to Politico, Democrats are turning the screws on the people that would build a wall. The idea is to punish businesses that work on Trump's project. California Democrats are advancing a law to blacklist any company involved in building that wall. California pension funds would be forbidden from investing in those companies. They would be locked out of all state contracts. You believe it? Democrats complain about how divisive the wall is. And yet they are the divisive ones. They're openly blackballing businesses that create badly needed jobs, that produce the tax income that pays their salaries and keeps the state running. Democrats get on their soapbox and they brag about tolerance. They claim to represent the working man, the little guy. But they're turning the screws on the little guy in order to pander to those entering the country illegally. They have the gall to treat pension funds as political weapons to hurt legal businesses who simply want to work. And they're doing this while whining that money withheld from illegal sanctuary cities would be punitive. These vindictive Democrats, they're the ones full of hate, folks. They have become the biggest hate group in the country, and even they believe the wall is coming. And it is. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is why we measure presidents' first 100 days. His first 100 days, he signed 76 bills into law, including the New Deal, government on steroids, became a yardstick to measure future presidents. The New Deal was actually a bad deal for America. FDR's big government intervention prolonged the Depression, but that's for another update. Now we are at Trump's first 100 days. The defining factor is not what he has or hasn't done, it's what his liberal opposition has done. On day one, Inauguration Day, liberal Democrats in Congress boycotted the event. That's an affront to our political system. Washington saw arson, vandalism, and violence by masked anti-Trump protesters. Since then, organized paid protesters have disrupted town hall meetings. Rioters have taken to the streets. Elected Democrats openly say they're going to defy immigration law. California wants to declare itself a sanctuary state. Liberal activist judges ignore the Constitution in order to thwart Trump's presidential powers. At universities, conservative speakers are threatened with violence to shut them up. Trump family members are accosted. Every day, the drive-by media tries to destroy Trump with hostile and inaccurate reporting. It's been 100 days of hate from liberals losing their grip on power. So buckle up, folks, because it is not going to get any better for them. Trump is going to end up cleaning their clocks. A federal judge has barged into the sanctuary city issue. U.S. District Judge William Vacuum Cleaner Orrick blocked President Trump's executive order, which simply promised to enforce existing law. That's all it did. It's a law signed in 1996 by Bill Clinton. And the law withholds certain federal money from cities that flout federal immigration law. Judge Vacuum Cleaner had to invent a legal reason to block Trump's order. He agreed with San Francisco and other jurisdictions that the mere threat to enforce this law is causing stress. This constitutes immediate irreparable harm, he said. And so the judge concocted a new violation, creating pre-enactment anxiety. So one unelected federal judge, an Obama appointee and donor, basically just overrode existing law. He overturned election results. He overruled the executive branch in Congress. Judge Orrick, not Trump, is the one acting dictatorially. The left's gloating started immediately. James Williams, lawyer representing Santa Clara County, told CNN it's a huge win. He said the threat to withhold money from state and local governments in Trump's executive order is dead. No, it'll be appealed. What's dying in America is the rule of law. If liberal lawmakers don't like certain laws or election results, they just ignore them. And activist judges jump right in to assist. To hell with the Constitution. It doesn't matter when we're trying to save ourselves from that dastardly Trump. Well, the Democrat National Committee deputy chairman doing what the rest of the party will not do, Minnesota Democrat Keith Ellison, is putting the blame for Democrat losses at the feet of Barack Obama. Now, first, Ellison had to kiss the ring, claiming to be a big fan of Obama, but then Ellison laid into him. For the state house seats, the governorships, the other losses that have wrecked the Democrat Party, Ellison says the losses, which are over 1,000 seats, threaten the Obama legacy. And Obama cannot say that he wasn't part of those losses. Now, Ellison wasn't finished either. He criticized Obama for not being a good party leader. He pointed out that in 2010, a redistricting year, that Obama should have campaigned vigorously, but he was barely visible. In 2014, again, Obama was nowhere to be found. The Democrats had record low turnout. He's great at getting himself elected, Ellison said, but not so great at working closely with Congress or raising money for state races. And that's all true, Mr. Ellison. But since you're pointing fingers, here's a finger for you. If any other president had been as self-serving as Obama, you Democrats would have let him have it at the time, not later once he's gone. But no, for 8 years you protected Obama from any and all criticism. And we all know why. You, Mr. Ellison, are just as much to blame as Obama. Okay, folks, I'm going to give you this straight from the source, ABC News. There is no honeymoon for Donald Trump in a new ABC News Washington Post poll, but also no regrets. He approaches his 100th day in office with the lowest approval rating at this point of any president in polls since 1945. Yet, 96% of those who supported him in November say they would do it again today. The poll shows Trump with 42% job approval, but virtually all of his supporters say they would do it again. This is flummoxing the media. They don't get it. So is the bad showing for Democrats. 67% of those polled say the Democrats are out of touch with the concerns of average Americans. On that, President Trump and Republicans poll better than the media's beloved Democrats. And worse, the Democrats have lost ground with their own base. If there was a do-over election, only 85% of Hillary Clinton's voters still say they're with her. According to ABC, Trump would win again, including the popular vote. The drive-by media, especially outlets like the Washington Post, New York Times, ABC, have spent every waking moment since the election viciously trying to destroy Trump. But the president gets strong poll support when it comes to specifics, like keeping jobs in America, the hit on Syria, and even something as silly as the amount of time he spends at Mar-a-Lago. The drive-by media is not succeeding in their effort to take Trump out. Not yet. University of Alaska Anchorage sponsored a month-long exhibition at their Fine Arts Gallery, and one of the first things visitors see is a painting of the Marvel Comics character Captain America. There are eagles on both shoulders, a young Hillary Clinton clinging to his leg, and the guy's holding up the severed head of President Trump. This is art, and the art was created by assistant professor of painting Thomas Chung. He says he was torn about showing the piece because he never talks about his personal political beliefs with his students. But he put the painting on display anyway after realizing how strongly he feels. He feels hatred. Now, Professor Chung says that even his pro-Trump students might benefit from talking about his painting with him so that they can understand why he hates the way he does. Some attendees did find the painting offensive. Good news, but the university ignored them and the painting remained on display, which is nothing unusual. The real surprise would be if the university had taken action, as in a recent case, when a professor was actually reprimanded for tweeting his wish that President Trump be hung. Well, Trump is hung. He meant hanged. But I remember a few years ago, the wall-to-wall outrage when a rodeo clown wore an Obama mask. If liberals could have severed that clown's head or hanged him, he was hung too, in real life they would have. Don't doubt me. Saturday's Earth Day. That's the highest high holy day for environmentalist wackos all over the world. Now, in addition to the usual kooks who always show up at Earth Day events, this year there will be geeks. Yes, my friends, there's a big political protest planned. Thousands of scientists will supposedly march on Washington to protest what they call the Trump administration's assault on evidence-based thinking. They'll also protest the new EPA budget and the elimination of global warming funding. Now, many of the scientists expected at the protest are employed by the federal government for now, and they're worried that under Trump their life's work might be disregarded and their jobs might be eliminated. Bill Nye, the science guy, is an honorary co-chair of the event. It figures he only has honorary degrees in science. He isn't a scientist at all. He's a performance artist, and he's a geek. And he's the perfect choice to lead a protest supporting the global warming geek hoax. News reports preview some of the protest signs to be unveiled on Saturday. Make America Smart Again is one. And try this question and answer manner. What do we want? Evidence-based policy. When do we want it? After peer review. That's going to light them up. Can't wait to see what kind of violence that one inspires. But at least this Earth Day March of the liberal scientists has potential. It could be one of the most ridiculous, pompous protests in history, and therefore good for a great laugh. According to the drive-by media, Republicans are having a lot of trouble at their town halls. You know why? Well, supposedly, Republicans are showing up mad because Obamacare might be repealed. You know how stupid that is? I mean, repealing Obamacare is what got them to the polls to elect Republicans. What they're not reporting is, in the media, these protesters, they're not Republicans. They're organized by Democrats. But what really isn't being reported is the trouble Democrats are running into at their town halls. The other day, the Jurassic Park senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, was jeered at a town hall. Tom Perez, the new head of the DNC, he was booed off the stage at one of his appearances. Things are so confusing for Democrats these days that Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill had to assume a new identity at her town hall. She pretended to be fiscally conservative. She was asked about free college tuition. You know what she said? Well, it's a great goal, but that would be very expensive. We can't just start having the government pay for everything, she said. Now, to Democrats, that's blasphemy. Their whole agenda is getting government to pay for everything from cradle to grave. Now, McCaskill's problem is she's up for re-election. Her state voted for Trump. She cannot afford to say what she really thinks, and she certainly can't afford to say what she'll really do if she fools voters again into sending her back for another term. Big problems on the Democrat side, folks. Don't doubt me. You probably never heard of the National Union of Healthcare Workers unless you're a member. Now, this so-called National Union has only 11,000 members, all of them in California. But they're making headlines as the first union to declare itself a sanctuary union. Now, as a sanctuary union, the NUHW says they can offer their illegal immigrant members protection from Trump's deportation dragnet and from management retaliation, whatever that means. They have partnered with a San Francisco law firm to represent members and their relatives. They say their mission is also to educate members how to hinder federal agents from determining their immigration status. The union is also trying to convince the hospitals and clinics and nursing homes where their members work to help shelter illegal immigrants who are patients and caregivers. Now, by declaring themselves as a sanctuary union, the National Union of Healthcare Workers promises to provide a safe space to discuss the issue and make a difference. Well, goody. Deportations and arrests of illegal immigrants have already spiked dramatically since Trump took over. By making it known they are a sanctuary union, they can make a difference by making themselves a good place for ICE to look for the next round of deportees. Go ahead, guys. Make yourselves a target. We love it. Well, hey, it looks like the pressure is off automakers. Look what just happened at the New York Auto Show. The tiny cars that fit the demands of the Obama regime are gone, folks, and in their place, gigantic SUVs. And these SUVs, they're bigger, they have more creature comforts, and they cost more. But that's not stopping buyers. In fact, a Ford marketing guy says that they expect a hot SUV market for 5 to 7 years. The vehicles could grab as much as half of all auto sales. Toyota's head of operations, he's expecting big things. The Camry is the best-selling passenger car in America, as it has been for years. But this year, he says, sales of their SUV might surpass the Camry. Now, more surprising are the demographics of buyers. Baby boomers a big market, of course, but do you know that millennials are coming on strong? I mean, that has to be a major disappointment to environmentalist wackos, despite schools inundating them as kids with global warming propaganda, despite the nonstop drive-by media scare stories and endless celebrity lectures. These millennials want their SUVs, and they want them big, and they want them mean. But the biggest letdown has to be among former Obama regime officials, because they waged an 8-year war against SUVs. They used regulations to steer automakers into making these itty-bitty electric cars that nobody wanted, and now nobody has to make what nobody wants to buy. Obama's gone, so let the good times roll in a hot new SUV, if that's your choice. It's up to you. Scott Pruitt is President Trump's new administrator to EPA. He's getting around-the-clock protection detail, and the Washington Post making a big deal about it. Now, they point out that Obama's appointee, Gina McCarthy, got full protection when she traveled internationally, but other than that, she only needed security going to and from work. Now, the Post says that Scott Pruitt is polarized. He's a polarizing pick to head the EPA because he attacked the agency when he was the Attorney General of Oklahoma. And they admit that there have been lots of protests since he was appointed, but they say it's still unclear why he needs the extra security. Well, let me try to explain this. He needs it because since Trump was elected president, you leftists have become totally unhinged. Did you forget the violence in the streets on Inauguration Day? Arsonists set fire to a limo right near the Washington Post headquarters? How about the violent protests when Trump's education secretary, Betsy DeVos, attempted to enter a public school? She was physically assaulted by leftist protesters in broad daylight. And how about the threats, including the college professor the other day who called for Trump to be hanged? Now, this danger is real. The vicious left is exploding in unhinged fury, and the drive-by media continues to help foment the hate. That's why the need for extra security. It's the smart thing to do, at least for a while till we beat them back. The liberal governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, the son of Mario the Pious, is offering a pious new program. He's giving free tuition to state university students. Of course, it's not free. Taxpayers are paying for it, as always. There's a hitch, though. The students must be New York residents for at least a year prior to enrolling. Plus, for every year students take the money, they must stay a year in New York after graduating. If they don't, the free money will be converted to loans, which they will have to pay back. Now, Governor Cuomo says this will ensure that out-of-state freeloaders don't take advantage of all the goodies. The residency requirements are upsetting some students and their advocates. What if they can't find jobs in New York when they finish school? They complain that it'll handcuff them from taking good out-of-state jobs. They don't think it's fair to be asked to pay back the money, even though they're working hard and can presumably afford it. It's not right they should have to pay it back. But a bigger issue is staring these liberals right in the face. Isn't it discriminatory and maybe even xenophobic to demand people prove their legal residence? What about those living in the shadows? What about the illegal residents of New York? How will they get their freebies? And how can it be that students need ID to get free college money while liberals argue they don't need ID to vote? Anybody want to try answering these questions? You've all heard of MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They have a publishing company, and they're dipping their toe into the children's book market. It's a book of fairy tales. And you know what the title is? Communism for Kids. The fairy tales have an agenda, teaching kids that communism is good. This is what they say about their book. It all unfolds like a story, with jealous princesses, fancy swords, displaced peasants, mean bosses, and tired workers. But before they know it, the readers are learning about the economic history of feudalism, class struggles, and capitalism, different ideas of communism, and more. Cartoon drawings of lovable little revolutionaries entice kids through the evils of capitalism. The book has earned praise from leftists who say it's especially needed now that Trump is president. Young readers get the message that while some forms of communism fail, class warfare ultimately leads to a better world. Yeah, it's the age-old lie, folks. The only reason communism always fails is because the wrong people have been in charge. No wonder liberals love the fairy tale of communism. They never own up to the awful reality of it. Poverty, scarcity, corruption, brutal oppression for those forced to live under it, not to mention the tens of millions murdered under communist leaders like Stalin and Mao. Communism for kids is dreary kitty-commie propaganda, and I predict young readers won't fall for it because I'm going to be competing against it. Screw this. How's this for Sanctuary City outreach? New York City provides IDs for anybody who wants one, even if they are illegal immigrants. So now New York wants to destroy the documents that people use to apply for the IDs in order to keep the information from President Trump. 2 members of the New York Assembly took the city to court to prevent them from destroying these documents. But last week, a state Supreme Court Justice, Philip Minardo, sided with the city. The judge said the personal documents could be destroyed. The decision is expected to be appealed. New York City's mayor, Bill de Blasio, hailed the ruling. He claims it'll protect the personal information of, get this, 1 million people in the city, and he vows to fight any appeal. Now, 16 years ago, a stone's throw away from City Hall, Islamic terrorists flew 2 hijacked planes into the World Trade Center. Afterward, we were told that law enforcement and intelligence services must connect the dots to avoid future attacks. Now we have liberal Democrats, including an out-of-control mayor, doing their best to destroy the very dots of 1 million people, all so they can pander to people here illegally and get their votes. It's beyond idiocy. It's lunacy, which means it's typical for today's Democrat Party. In other words, folks, it's what we always say it is. It's liberalism. You just better accept it. Mike Cox is a climate change advisor in the EPA's Seattle office. He's not happy. He sent the director of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, a very mean letter, very alarmed about the new direction of the EPA. Cox complained that Trump administration policies are contrary to what a majority of the American people want. The American people, he said, want safe air, clean water, safe land. Cox bravely said all this on his way out the door. He's retiring from the EPA. Folks, do you really believe that Trump or us want dirty water and dirty air and bad land? Is that really what they're implying here? Do they realize how stupid and dumb making that claim really is? Let me tell you what this guy's really upset about. He's upset that Trump is shutting down all of this having to do with a global warming hoax, which is what a majority of the American people really want. They want to stop being blamed for something they're not doing, destroying the planet. Another reason this little guy's ticked off is the Trump team is erasing many of the job-killing regulations put in place by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats like this guy Mike Cox and his buddies. The truth is, Cox is freaked out because he's watching his life's work at the EPA unraveling. The majority of the American people are literally thrilled to death that is happening, said with a smile. A lot of people think the Democrat Party is unified in everything that it does, but it isn't. The Washington Post sat in on a recent Youngstown, Ohio Democrat strategy session. Local Democrats complained that the National Democrats' comeback strategy was designed by a bunch of elitists, protesters, and wacko consultants from California and New York, people who don't have a clue about what Democrats in the middle of the country care about. A county chairman said that even though they scream about the economy and jobs, National Democrats still don't care. He said Trump talks about trade and jobs, while the national Democrat elites are still obsessing about which bathrooms people go into. He said the Democrat Party sets their hair on fire. They run around like it's the end of the world whenever Trump so much as sneezes. But Democrats in middle America don't care about that stuff. They're struggling. They're living paycheck to paycheck. The Democrats are not helping them. They've left the little guy behind. They're trying to make ends meet, and their party still doesn't care. The Post also quotes Ohio Democrat Congressman Tim Ryan, who says the Democrat Party's relationship with blue-collar workers, once the base, is fundamentally broken. And you know what? The local Democrats are right. They are being ignored, and it isn't going to change anytime soon, because Democrats in Washington are embarrassed of anybody who doesn't live in New York, Washington, or California. Doesn't matter what party. They don't like you. You heard about the story of the high school journalists in Kansas? Oh, yeah, this was so big the Washington Post and all the others picked it up. These journalists in Kansas investigated the background of their new principal. Her name was Amy Roberts, and they found out that she did not go to a university. She got a degree from an online diploma mill, not a university. And after their story questioning her background was published, the principal resigned. And almost immediately, these young journalists found themselves in the news. Their story was all over social media. It was reported on by respected members of the drive-bys. The kids were shocked that they got so much attention from big-time news outlets. But it is not a surprise why these high school journalists were held up for such praise, because their elders in the business were as proud as a mother lion watching her cubs perform their first successful hunt. Because these kids didn't just wound an authority figure, they took her out. Now, I have some advice for you high school cub reporters. You're not real drive-by journalists yet. Your first scalp was somebody who did do something wrong. You found out and reported it. That's no big deal. What you have to do is find somebody totally innocent, preferably a CEO or a mayor or some big figure, and ruin them. You ruin somebody's interest, and that's your ticket to the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN. Don't doubt me. President Trump received an exceptionally warm reception in traditionally Democrat territory. It was the 2017 Legislative Conference for North America's Building Trades Unions. The president began by giving shout-outs to construction trades like pipe fitters, plumbers, cement masons, electricians, and they cheered when he said that they were the backbone of America and that together we're going to rebuild the country. They cheered when he told them that with the talent in that room, they could build any city, anytime, better than anyone. Trump held up a gigantic poster showing all the permits needed just to build a highway today. He said the process could take 10 years, and that's why he's getting rid of many of those regulations. He said we're a nation of builders, and it's about time we had a builder in the White House. He promised his door would always be open to labor unions. Now, contrast that to the last 8 years. Not a single member of the Obama administration knew or even knows how to build anything except more government. And I'm not exaggerating. Not a single one in Obama's orbit had any actual experience in the private sector. Trump's speech, massive shot across the bow to Democrats, and they know it. Because if they lose the union vote and if they lose some union money, then they lose their party. Don't doubt me. Don't ever doubt me. The wacko far-left mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, is a bitter critic of President Trump. He recently vowed that New York will remain a sanctuary city no matter what the president or the attorney general says. Apparently, some New York City cops see things differently. The mayor had ordered that federal immigration officials are to be contacted only when an illegal immigrant is accused of a violent crime. But recently, 2 nonviolent illegal immigrants were given up to ICE by the New York Police Department. One of these illegals, the guy deported in the past, was accused of rubbing up against a woman on the subway, a misdemeanor. The other guy has a standing deportation order and is accused of burglary. The NYPD reportedly alerted ICE of their court appearances. A police department spokesman tried to downplay the whole thing, insisting that de Blasio's sanctuary policies were not compromised. We don't know what'll happen to the cops who ratted out the bad hombres. Depends on how vindictive the mayor is. But we have learned something. While rubbing up on women in subways and burglary may not be big deals to the mayor of New York, there are still some cops who take those things seriously. Thank goodness. It still doesn't resolve the problem, however, that New York is trying to harbor bad guys to the detriment of their own population. Go figure. If you thought that Tom Perez, the new Democrat National Committee chairman, would lead his party as a responsible adult, bad news, you were wrong. I never thought he would anyway. Last Friday, Perez spoke to a crowd in Newark, New Jersey. He worked the crowd into a frenzy. He shouted, "Donald Trump, you don't stand for our values. You didn't win the election." And there was more. But let's stop right there. If Donald Trump didn't win the election, who did? I don't see Bernie Sanders signing executive orders in the Oval Office, and we certainly don't see Hillary Clinton leading the liberal pantsuit brigade from the White House. Now, Perez went on to call Trump a bully and told his audience that Trump doesn't give a about people. The drive-by media is reporting that Perez gave a fiery speech. It wasn't fiery. It was vulgar, it was ignorant, it was low rent and hateful from a guy, remember, who was Obama's labor secretary. Now, for those of you who keep demanding a truce in our politics, I hope you're listening very carefully here. What came out of Tom Perez's mouth ought to be a lesson to you. There is no working with these people. There's no room for compromise. And there's no possibility of civil discourse. They are deranged. They are driven by hate and rage. They're consumed by it. Their defeat is the only thing we can do. California drivers already pay higher taxes than almost anybody else in the country, and they're going to get hit again. Democrats in California plan to spend $52 billion on roads and infrastructure. And to pay for it, the Democrats in the legislature and the governor, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to raise taxes. 12 cents per gallon on gasoline, on top of what people are paying now. Diesel drivers, 20 cents per gallon. And if you drive an electric car to save the planet, guess what? You get hit with a $100 fee as your clean energy contribution. Other California voters are going to find out about other fees when you get walloped with them. The few Republicans left in the state, they're objecting, but they have no political power, so they may as well go out and play golf. They can't stop it. The unions, the construction industry, who are going to build all this new infrastructure, they're in bed with the Democrats. They're beside themselves with glee. They're going to hit the jackpot once this thing passes, which it will because it's a one-party state. Now, all of these higher taxes are going to hurt business, hurt low-income families, increase the cost of goods and services. People's standard of living is going to plummet. Nothing's new. It's California. You keep electing liberals, and higher taxes and a lower standard of living is just the way of life. On Monday, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions appeared at the White House daily press briefing. He made an appeal to local governments to cooperate with federal immigration law. He also warned the Justice Department was serious about withholding federal money from cities that don't play ball. A couple of days later, the liberals who run Seattle sent Jeff Sessions their answer in the form of a lawsuit. They claim that President Trump's executive order violates the 10th Amendment of the Constitution by making local governments enforce federal law. They also argue that it's unconstitutional to hold hostage federal funds that aren't related to immigration. Now, technically, there's nothing to sue over because nothing's happened to Seattle yet, because no federal money has been withheld yet. But Seattle is claiming that the mere threat of withholding money has damaged them because it makes it impossible for Seattle to come up with a budget for next year. Now, look, federal immigration law is cut and dry. There's no guesswork involved. Local governments are required to share information with federal officials about the immigration status of people they detain. Over 80% of voters want immigration laws followed, but these liberals are determined to disobey them. The good news is that this issue is coming to a head, and thanks to the Trump administration, the battle for the rule of law has been joined. Finally. President Trump's efforts to build the wall continue. The Department of Homeland Security is getting bids from lots of companies that want to help build it. Trump administration's asking Congress for $1 billion to spend on it this year. Now, Senate Democrats want no part of this. They met with La Raza and promised that they'll make sure it doesn't happen. Chuck Schumer told La Raza Democrats will do whatever it takes to stop the wall. Robert Menendez, New Jersey, said that Congress shouldn't pay a dime because, after all, Trump claimed he'd make Mexico pay for it. Now, La Raza asked Democrats to do whatever they had to, including shutting down the government when a stopgap spending measure comes up in April. Schumer didn't commit the Democrats to it, but he said he hoped Republicans would not put the wall funding request in the spending measure. Well, it looks like Schumer's hope is the Republicans' command. Senator Roy Blunt, top Republican Senate Committee on Appropriations, just said that they probably won't include Trump's request to fund the wall until next year. So the news isn't that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are pressured by La Raza. The news is that the Republicans are afraid of a Democrat government shutdown because they think they'll get blamed for it, even though the Democrats are responsible for it. And they're probably right. The Nebraska Democrat Party wants refugees. They're giving them gift baskets, diapers, kitchen utensils, and voter registration forms. A letter signed by Jane Klebe comes with the forms. She points out that Nebraska welcomes more refugees than any other state per capita. She says that Trump's travel ban's racist, so it's a call to action for them in Nebraska. Refugees left their political parties, their old countries behind, so the Nebraska Democrats wanted to make sure they'd be embraced here. As for the voter registration forms, she says it's not illegal for the Democrats to hand them out. She's just helping the refugees become familiar with them. A Republican state lawmaker wants the Democrats to provide a list of all the people who were given these forms as part of their welcome. That way, voter rolls can be checked to make sure everything's on the up and up. The Democrats say that that's offensive. It's absolutely ludicrous, says Klebe. It's a sad state of affairs that this is where the Republican Party is going right now. Ms. Klebe, you Democrats, you don't give a rip that it's illegal for non-citizens to vote. Ludicrous doesn't even begin to describe what's going on with your party. This is such a transparent effort that you're engaging in. It proves this is the only reason you care about immigration. The Politico genuinely surprised that the Trump administration is not following a playbook of hate in dealing with California. The biggest surprise came after California asked for help when the Oroville Dam spillway was in danger of collapse. Instead of being vindictive and telling the residents to take a hike for not preparing for winter flooding, the Trump team came through with millions of dollars in aid for about a dozen California counties. The governor, Jerry Brown, has been openly hostile to Trump. He said vicious things about him. Lately, the governor dialed it back a bit since he realizes he has to work with Trump to get what he wants. But Politico's nevertheless stunned that despite his coolness to the state, Trump has avoided opportunities for open conflict with California. Now, during the Obama years, certain natural disasters in red states were ignored, even though the governors asked for help. And there was no doubt Obama had an enemies list. Just follow the trail of targets, IRS or other Obama agencies. What the Politico points out without meaning to is how liberals think and behave when they have power. In their shock that Donald Trump is not punishing his supposed enemies, they admit what they do all the time. And there's no doubt they perceive us as their real enemies, and they treat us accordingly. And when we're nice to them like this, they think we're a bunch of suckers. Okay, so last October, Donald Trump opened the Trump International Hotel in Washington near the White House. It was a grand old post office that had long been vacant. Trump signed a 60-year lease with the feds in 2013 and then spent more than $200 million to turn the building into a luxury hotel. Now, ever since he won the election, Democrats have been trying to turn that hotel into a political liability for Trump. They claim that it's unconstitutional for President Trump to have any connection with the hotel. Even after he divested himself of day-to-day involvement with his company, the Democrats continue to complain and whine and moan. Last week, the Government Services Administration, a GSA, which oversees federal properties, sent Donald Trump Jr. a letter, said the property is in full compliance with federal law because Trump Sr. will receive no direct proceeds from it while he is POTUS. The letter also said the deal has benefited the government. By the time the hotel opened, it had already generated over $5 million in income to the government, which had been losing millions each year on the property. Now, that should be the end of the story, but it's not, because the Democrats are still fuming. Now they're complaining that even though Trump won't benefit from the deal while he's president, he will after his term ends in 2024. There's no pleasing these people, ever, which is why it really is best to ignore them, folks. Life gets so much better when you do. Well, the high and mighty New York Times says a new threat to academic freedom has emerged. And it's not Donald Trump. It's a new website launched last week called Professor Watchlist. The Watchlist names 200 college professors who, according to students, spread leftist propaganda in their classrooms that are biased against conservative students. The mere existence of this list is supposedly a threat to academic freedom. Julio Cesar Pino, an associate professor of history at Kent State, is on the list. He complains that the goal of the site is to shame and defame professors. Other critics warn the site will be used to harass professors or maybe even sabotage their careers. Not so, says Charlie Kirk, the executive director of Turning Point USA, which started the watch list. He says that it isn't a secret that some college professors are totally out of line and it's time to expose them. I cannot tell you how many calls I've taken over the years from college students and parents describing the liberal propaganda these kids are routinely exposed to in class and the hateful treatment they've received at liberal universities. I mean, they have to endure ridicule, bullying, and blatant hostility, bad grades, all of that, in silence, for fear their grades will suffer if they speak up. The Professor Watchlist is not a threat to academic freedom. It makes the point that conservatives have academic freedom too, which is a point long overdue. Kablooey! Nobel Prize-winning scientist Mario Molina from Mexico is among the loudest critics. He says the message being sent from the U.S. is, we won't do what the U.S. has promised to do on climate change. Wrong. We never promised to do any of this. Our Congress and our people were ignored for 8 years. These were all Obama climate change promises. Now he's gone. That's the signal all of you people need to get. Last month in Los Angeles, Sandra Duran was on her way home from church services when she had an unfortunate encounter with Estuardo Alvarado. The car that Alvarado was driving slammed into the 42-year-old mom at an intersection, killing her. He was drunk at the time. He was fleeing from another crash that he caused. Alvarado is no stranger to the law since 1998. He's been charged with over 20 felonies and misdemeanors. Those include weapons and drug charges, and he's been deported from the U.S. 5 times. Sandra Duran's fiancé says his life has been broken forever by her death. The couple has 2 kids. They were due to be married this fall. He says the system failed us. He also says people who are for sanctuary cities need to pay attention to what's going on. He said we have these criminals that are roaming around the cities and we aren't being protected as American citizens. Well, Sandra Duran, sadly, is just the latest example of the lawless environment that liberal Democrats have foisted on us with their love of sanctuary cities, their warm embrace of illegal immigration, and their callous disregard for the safety and lives of American citizens. Sandra Duran, her fiancé, her kids, they're nothing more than pawns to liberal Democrats. Their lives have no meaning. To the left, the liberal agenda is all that matters. Well, just when we thought investigative journalism was dead, the Washington Post brings us back to the Woodward and Bernstein glory days. This is sure to shake up Washington. It is a full-fledged hold-the-presses scandal. Headline, Big Candy lobbying the Trump administration. It's also holding events at Trump hotels. Really? Big Candy? My friends, there's no doubt about the veracity of this report. It's not fake news. Last week, candy makers from all over America held a conference at Trump's Doral property in South Florida near Miami. On the schedule, a lobbying strategy session in the Ivanka Trump ballroom. Even worse, a dessert networking event inside the Donald J. Trump grand patio. Now, this may seem all sweetness and light on the outside, but on the inside, the candy corruption just oozes. In between meetings, these candy makers, part of the National Confectioners Association, allowed attendees to play golf on Trump golf courses and enjoy massages at a Trump spa. And that's not all. The association also booked space at the Trump International Hotel in Washington for next year, right down the street from the Trump White House. Scandalous. Worse than Watergate. It breaks the emolument clause of the Constitution somehow. Now, you can bet that even now, Democrats are writing articles of impeachment. President Trump has seduced the candy man, Sammy Davis Jr. This cannot stand. It's got a racial component to boot. On Monday afternoon, right before that big blizzard was supposed to destroy New York, the National Weather Service knew the storm might fizzle. But they kept giving worst-case predictions of epic snow amounts because, according to the Washington Post, they didn't want to confuse the public. They're a bunch of idiots. The Post criticizes that decision. They call it well-intentioned but flawed. They say it could erode public trust in weather forecasts. The Weather Service has a responsibility to put out the best possible forecast, says the Post. If they learn that they're wrong about something, they must revise their forecasts and tell the public immediately. Well, that's not how the Post or other drive-by media outlets think about climate forecasting. I mean, for decades, there have been all kinds of melodramatic global warming forecasts that have not happened. The end of snow, for instance. When it turned out some so-called climate scientists faked their data, the drive-bys ignored it. When it was obvious the world was not heating up as predicted, they broomed the term global warming and they started talking about climate change instead. So the drive-by media is upset that the Weather Service will erode public trust by not reporting accurate forecasts the day before a storm. But they couldn't care less about the bogus forecasts of climate doom that they have been reporting for decades. Anybody have a little problem with this? If there was ever an award for the most ironic news story, this could win it. The Washington Post recently reported on the problems illegal immigrants face after they've been deported back to Mexico. It's supposed to make you cry and make you mad. Some of the illegal immigrants that the Post chose to profile lived in America for decades. They are said to barely recognize the Mexico they were forced to return to. And there are other problems. Amalia Garcia, Mexico City's Labor Department secretary, complains that many of these people come not knowing how to speak Spanish. Not knowing the language of the country they're living in makes them feel very bitter, very ashamed, and very hurt. It does. Another problem for the newly arrived Mexicans is that their kids are having problems attending school. Apparently, the Mexican government puts up all sorts of roadblocks. For instance, transcripts of their grades in the U.S. must be in Espanol, and the red tape applying to school can take over a year to fix. But for many, the biggest problem is that the Mexican government isn't generous with public assistance, welfare benefits. There's no government-mandated bilingual help. There are no schools and few welfare benefits. And this is for people who are Mexican citizens, not illegal immigrants. So, welcome home to Mexico, mi amigos. Well, the Democrat mayors across the country are rushing to the cameras to declare their loyalty to sanctuary cities. All told, there are about 300 Democrat-run cities and counties that have adopted this lawless sanctuary policy. Chicago's Rahm Emanuel reassured the illegal population they were safe and secure in his city. Chicago has in the past been a sanctuary, and it will always be a sanctuary city, he said. Mayors of New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Philadelphia, and San Francisco all said that they will defy federal immigration law. They promised to keep illegal immigrants from being deported. They were reacting to President Trump reaffirming his plan to enforce immigration law, starting with those who have criminal records. Now, you would think that that would be celebrated in Chicago, which is closing in on a record 4,000 shootings this year, and where the budget is such a mess. They're struggling to keep schools open. Speaking of budget, if Trump stops federal funding to sanctuary cities, as he promised, San Francisco alone could lose $1 billion. But to Democrats, federal money is secondary. Our laws mean nothing. As long as Democrats see illegal aliens as voters, Democrat voters, the party will stop at nothing to protect them. Since Democrats lost the white working class, illegals, they think, are their ticket to power. It's going to be an ugly battle in an even uglier war. But for the first time in years, we're actually going to fight the damn thing. It's about time. I want you to meet the San Francisco sanctuary duo, Mayor Ed Lee and City Attorney Dennis Herrera. On January 31st, Lee and Herrera filed a federal lawsuit to stop President Trump's executive order cutting funds to so-called sanctuary cities. Last week, the duo went back to court to demand a freeze on Trump's order until the lawsuit's decided. The driving factor is money. San Francisco's budget is close to $10 billion. The mayor is drafting a blueprint how to spend it all, but President Trump's executive orders throwing sand into the gears. Mayor Lee told the court that if the Trump administration strips all federal money from San Francisco for refusing to comply with immigration law, the result will be catastrophic. The mayor claims he's operating blindly because he doesn't know how much money the city stands to lose. The city's budget director warns that even if it's only a 10% cut, that they'll have to fire first responders, which is what elected liberals always say when they talk about people who have to be fired first. Lawyers doubt the sanctuary duo's suit will go anywhere because you can't mount a challenge before the city's actually lost any money. Okay, fine, but that misses the point. There's something more fundamental at stake here. These Democrats are demanding a federal court stop a duly elected president from enforcing federal law because they want to protect sanctuary cities which are not legal. It's sheer madness. This should be thrown out yesterday. Okay, I am going to tell this story the way an environmentalist wacko would tell it. There are grave concerns about the direction of the EPA under Scott Pruitt, appointed by Donald Trump to take over the agency. As the New York Times says, Pruitt built a career suing the agency he now leads. Pruitt is even filling top positions with like-minded conservatives who are climate change deniers. These deniers are going to roll back environmental protections under the pretext that they harm business. The Times says that Pruitt's EPA leadership is fundamentally at odds with career officials, with scientists, and employees who carry out the agency's mission. Pruitt's changes are causing strife and gridlock. Clean air and water and the future of the planet are at risk. Agency morale is being crushed. The zealous employees and scientists who spent careers creating protections, i.e. regulations, under Obama, will be ordered to undo all of their wonderful work. It is a nightmare. Okay, off with the pink hat. This is from me, Mayor of Realville. Look, this might come as a surprise to you so-called journalists at the New York Times and to you wackos who believe their dribble. The planet's fine. It's not fragile. What's at risk is your global warming hoax and your job-killing junk science. Your liberal nightmare is a dream come true for the rest of us, and we are smiling. On February 21st, California state senators honored Tom Hayden, who assumed room temperature last October. Now, Hayden had served in the California Senate 92 to 2000. He became famous during the Vietnam War as an anti-war protester who worked with the communist North Vietnamese. Hayden later married another anti-war protester who sided with the communists, that'd be Jane Fonda. Now, Republican State Senator Janet Wynn was respectful during the Senate tribute. She stepped out of the room while Democrats praised Hayden. 2 days later, The Vietnamese-born senator went to the Senate floor to speak for the 500,000 Vietnamese Americans in California. Senator Nguyen said that Tom Hayden sided with a communist government that enslaved and or killed millions of Vietnamese, including, she said, members of her own family. She praised the military of the United States and South Vietnam for fighting for freedom, for without their bravery, she wouldn't be standing there. Well, she wasn't standing there on the California Senate floor for long. Democrats were enraged. Ms. Nguyen was ordered to shut up, and as she kept speaking, orders were given to remove her by force. She was grabbed and bodily thrown out of the Senate. California Senate Democrats ought to be embarrassed that a proud Vietnamese American woman cannot speak in praise of our military or tell the real story of her heritage. But Democrats don't have enough class to be embarrassed or ashamed. They were too busy praising the communist opponents of the United States. So I'm guessing you missed the big celebrations that were held on Monday in honor of International Polar Bear Day. Yeah, it was supposed to focus awareness on the plight of the polar bear and the suffering they face because of you. Because it's your modern lifestyle supposedly to blame for global warming. You're wiping them out. Well, here's an inconvenient truth. This year, their polar bear population is up 27% from 2005, despite all those dire predictions that Arctic ice is disappearing because of global warming, and despite a photo supposedly showing a polar bear stranded on melting ice about to drown. Climate analyst Paul Homewood confirms that a growing number of observational studies have documented that polar bears are thriving despite shrinking summer ice. He also confirms that polar bears are not starving to death. They're not turning into cannibals, and no polar bear population's been wiped out anywhere. They've been reproducing, folks, like crazy. And since there are no Planned Parenthood clinics in the Arctic, the female polar bears are actually giving birth to their babies. So there are a whole lot more of them these days, which means this International Polar Bear Day gives the world something to celebrate. Mother Nature has once again prevailed over junk science. The only thing melting away is the global warming hoax. The polar bears, they're chilling out. They're A-OK. They're fine and dandy. Some school districts in the greater Boston area are alarmed by President Trump's increasingly hostile stances. So administrators are sending letters to students and parents to offer reassurance. Now, what are the president's increasingly hostile stances? Well, there are three, according to the Boston Globe. The first is President Trump's executive order pausing travel from 7 Mid-East nations until we square away our vetting process, because ISIS has threatened to infiltrate the refugees and carry out terror attacks on our soil. The second Trump hostile stance is his executive order strengthening border security and directing ICE to enforce existing immigration law, particularly when it comes to illegal immigrants with criminal records. The third increasingly hostile stance, the one that tops all the others according to the Boston school administrators, is Trump's executive order on school bathrooms. It overturned Obama's directive to allow transgender students to use whatever public school bathroom they wanted, regardless of other students' privacy concerns. That just a bridge too far. Never mind that Trump's order returns the decision to states. Never mind that school districts like Greater Boston can implement whatever policy they want without federal intervention. Now, these Northeast liberal elitist educators claim that protecting the country against terror attacks, enforcing existing immigration law, and allowing states to choose their own transgender policies, this is hostile? These people are hostile to reality. Before addressing Congress last night, President Trump signed off on his budget outline. Military spending will increase by a whopping 10%. Trump said the military's gotten the shaft in recent years. We need to fix it. The bumped-up military spending will be offset by dramatic cuts in other federal agencies, except for the VA and law enforcement operations. So discretionary spending will not go up overall. It's going to stay right where it is, around $1 trillion. As soon as the Senate Minority Leader Chuck U. Schumer got this news, he ran to the Democrat playbook. He said that Trump's proposals would help the rich and take a meat axe to the programs that help the middle class and the poor. Schumer also said that Trump would hurt agencies that protect clean air and clean water and protect consumers from Wall Street because nobody was safe, before Obama. Now, as predictably as the sun rises in the East, Schumer will soon read from the rest of the Democrat playbook. Children will starve. Their school lunches will be taken away. Granny's going to be forced to eat dog food without a new can opener. And people will have to choose between medicine or rent. Now, for years, I have asked, why is it the federal government is never asked to make do with less? Finally, there's a good chance some government agencies might actually have to. And this is going to cause a near nuclear explosion. You watch. My friends, the picture looks grim for the big film studios. The Wall Street Journal says this year's Oscars took place during one of the gloomiest times for the movie industry in recent memory. Paramount lost almost $500 million last year. Sony wrote off almost $1 billion. None of the movies up for Best Picture made $100 million. That's considered the break-even point for major movies. According to a survey by The Hollywood Reporter, 60% of you could not name a single movie nominated for Best Picture. Now, the Journal lists some reasons for all this. One, fewer people go to the movies because of Netflix, HBO, and other ways of watching. Two, lack of originality. Most big studio movies are based on comic books, best-selling novels, or old franchises like Star Wars. And three, big stars, sky-high pay is hurting the bottom line. Now, these explanations make sense as far as they go. But the Journal leaves out a big reason that big movie is laying an egg, and that's politics. The endless tirades from hardcore liberal actors have turned off millions of their former customers. Hollywood is totally disconnected from much of its audience. And with so many stars suffering Trump derangement syndrome, that's not going to get better anytime soon. Liberalism is why so many Americans think that Hollywood values just aren't worth paying to see. Who wants to be insulted and slapped in the face 3 straight hours? Okay, an illegal immigrant from El Salvador, Esteban Rafael Marquez Velasquez, any other host could do that, walked out of a New York jail, even though ICE had submitted an official detainer request to hold him for deportation. The New York Post reports city officials ignored the federal petition because New York is a sanctuary city, thanks to the far-left idiot mayor Bill de Blasio. Velasquez had been in Rikers for disorderly conduct. By his own admission, Velasquez is a member of the violent street gang MS-13, according to Thomas Decker, ICE's New York field director. Now, thankfully, ICE found and arrested the illegal immigrant gangster after he was released back into the streets by the Democrats who run New York. Velasquez now faces deportation. Things didn't turn out so well in Denver, though. The police refused to honor ICE's request to hold Ever Vallis, a 19-year-old illegal immigrant, jailed for theft. Denver authorities let him walk. Weeks later, this clown robbed and murdered a man at a rail station, according to charges. The Denver Sheriff's Department standing by their sanctuary city position. They claim it would have been unconstitutional to hold this guy in jail until ICE could pick him up. Now, the liberals who run these sanctuary cities are not sorry. No matter how many American citizens are beaten, robbed, raped, or even murdered by known criminals who are illegal immigrants, liberals are going to keep releasing them until somebody makes them stop. The Mexican Foreign Minister, Luis Vergari, is spitting mad over President Trump's new deportation orders, and he's promising a fight. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Homeland Secretary John Kelly were en route to meet with the Mexican president when this guy blew up. Here's his reaction to America finally enforcing our immigration laws. We are not going to accept it because we don't have to accept it because it is not in the interest of Mexico, he said. This guy's especially ticked that non-Mexican citizens who illegally entered the U.S. from Mexico could be sent packing back to Mexico per Trump's executive order. The Foreign Minister of Mexico is also furious that Mexican illegal immigrants could be deported home in greater numbers. He vowed to take the issue to the United Nations in order to defend the rights of Mexican migrants to stay in America indefinitely and illegally. Now, I don't know what this guy thinks the UN is going to do about it. Send in blue helmet troops to stand in front of Trump's wall to keep us from repatriating Mexicans. But the sense of entitlement here is stunning. The Mexican government apparently believes their citizens have a right to come and stay here illegally. Well, I'll tell you, it's well past time that mistaken notion gets corrected, and right now. A new Harvard-Harris poll shows that President Trump has overwhelming public support for cracking down on so-called sanctuary cities. According to The Hill, 80% of voters say local law enforcement should have to comply with the law. They think cops should inform federal agents about the illegal immigrants they encounter as required. Now, right now, hundreds of cities run by Democrats are openly flouting the law. They are refusing to cooperate with the feds, and it could end up costing them. Reuters says that the top 10 sanctuary cities collect over $2 billion in federal money. President Trump has ordered Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly to hold back those funds if they don't cooperate. Now, not long ago, political consultants all warned Republicans cracking down on illegal immigration was bad, bad, bad politics. It would be the end of the Republican Party, don't you know? Many timid Republicans believed them and gave Trump no chance of winning the election as he campaigned on getting tough. Well, we know how that turned out. Now the politics of enforcing our immigration law can be put to another test. I have a challenge for you Democrats. If you think supporting sanctuary cities and illegal immigration is such a big winner, why don't you run on it in the midterm elections? Go ahead, look the American voter straight in the eye and tell them they are wrong. Tell them you believe in sanctuary cities and illegal immigration, and let's see where that gets you. Last Thursday, there was a national protest to show Americans how difficult life would be with no immigrants around. A Day Without Immigrants was organized in response to the latest raids of illegal immigrants with criminal records. Well, this week, CNN has a story about business owners defending their decision to fire workers who went to the protest instead of showing up to work, as if the bosses had done something wrong. Now, when employees at a Colorado masonry company told the owner they planned to skip work in protest, he warned them what would happen. He told them, if you're going to stand up for what you believe in, you have to be willing to pay the price. Well, they protested anyway, and he fired them. 30 bricklayers and a foreman. He called the protest a slap in the face because he supports immigrant labor. But nobody, he said, is going to dictate to him how his company is run. Other business owners got no advance word that workers would protest. They didn't call in. They just didn't show up. And they, too, were fired. And some of them had the nerve to complain to CNN, and it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. So it turns out that for some protesters, a day without immigrants resulted in many days with no work, no income, and no sympathy. Another liberal bright idea backfiring once again, blowing up right in their liberal faces. Well, the liberals have come up with yet another way to protest the election. The NWRCC, National War Resistance Coordinating Committee, says that since Trump's inauguration, there's renewed interest in tax resistance. The NWRCC claims that something has clicked in the minds of thousands of people across the country who don't want to pay for Trump's agenda. So they're recycling a tactic left over from the Vietnam protest days. They're going to boycott taxes. The group says that people are joining the boycott because they're fed up with things that are part of the foundation of our country. What things? Well, extreme militarism, for one. Also mass incarceration, police brutality, mass deportations. None of which are happening. But the tax resistance movement is attracting celebrities anyway. Mia Farrow says that she refuses to pay a penny of her taxes toward Trump's insane, insulting wall. Gloria Steinem, the feminist dinosaur, says that she'll deduct an amount from her tax returns that she thinks ought to go to Planned Parenthood, kill babies. So along with 1,000 other things they're boycotting, liberals now plan to stiff the IRS. Good luck with that. They might as well try to boycott death. So, a word of caution. Before the libs willfully evade taxes, they should talk to Hollywood actor Wesley Snipes. He boycotted the IRS, and then a judge gave him time to boycott his freedom. in a medium security facility, and they liked him. Imagine when they get hold of these feminazis. Okay, so it's Tuesday. Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank claimed that President Trump's unpopularity is causing a Republican uprising. His piece was titled, "Trump's Toxicity Has Republicans Running Away from Their Constituents." What was his evidence? Well, Republicans in several states have faced rowdy town halls. We're told that in Utah, Jason Chaffetz was confronted by angry constituents who want to keep Obamacare. Now, here's what we're supposed to believe. Republican voters who for 5 years have demanded that Congress get rid of Obamacare now all of a sudden love it. And they're attacking their own congressmen at town halls to vent their anger at Trump for trying to take it away. Trump, by the way, who they voted for and are happy with. Now, meanwhile, another news story appeared in the Washington Post in the same day with this headline: Democrats bracing for town hall protests directed at them ask Bernie Sanders for help. Well, now that says it all. The Democrats know who these protesters really are. They are not and never have been Republican voters upset over Obamacare being repealed. They're not mad at Trump. They're out-of-control, loony leftists being bought and paid to show up. Now, if Mr. Milbank read his own paper, he might learn that Obama and Soros are behind the protests, part of a strategery to intimidate elected representatives of both parties into keeping Obamacare as they want big government. And then again, you can't blame Milbank for not reading the Washington Post. Who does? Too much fake news in that paper. Okay, folks, this guy's not a household name here. His name is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, running for president of Mexico. He's considered a populist, and he may pull it off. Who knows? So if somebody wants to be president of Mexico, where better to target voters? Well, right here in America. Senor Obrador held a huge rally last Sunday in Los Angeles and used the occasion to smear President Trump. He said when they want to build a wall to segregate populations, or when the word foreigner is used to insult, denigrate, and discriminate against our fellow human beings, it goes against the humanity, it goes against the intelligence, and it goes against history, he said. Senor Obrador also issued a threat to the Mexican government. He said that Mexico better haul America in front of the United Nations to condemn our human rights violations. That's what he calls America enforcing U.S. immigration law. If Mexico doesn't take us to the UN, then he's going to do it himself. Now, here's the irony. By law, American citizens are not allowed to take part in political protests in Mexico. Americans cannot buy property there. They can't send kids to school there. They can't collect welfare checks there. Americans caught violating Mexico's immigration laws go to the clink. Yet Senor Populist, an overbearing leftist, comes here and demands that we embrace people who violate our laws. There's a word for this insulting garbage. It's called liberalismo, liberalism. Learn it, love it, and never like it. Okay, so over the weekend, New York Times ran a story about the sense of dread that civil servants are feeling. Federal employees are shaken by the Trump agenda. Now, at the EPA, groups of so-called scientists met last week to strategize. They're trying to figure out how to slow walk Trump's environmental orders. Former Google, Facebook, and Microsoft employees who left to join the Obama regime are plotting how to stop Trump from using their government databases to carry out his immigration policy. Now, the Times admits that most of these government bureaucrats are Democrats burrowed into every agency. Many are struggling to come to terms with working under Trump. They face a moral dilemma, having to work for somebody they so hate. Now, of course, the New York Times is sympathetic to these people. If this insubordination had happened under Obama, the Times would be leading the outrage chorus and outing them and getting rid of them. Now, these unelected civil servants have been given government jobs to carry out the executive branch agenda regardless of who runs it. They don't make policy. They're supposed to implement it. Now, here's how to solve this big moral dilemma. If they don't like their jobs, they should quit. If they slow walk or sabotage or plot against the president, he should solve their moral dilemma for them in 2 words. You're fired. Now, get out and stay out and never come back. You just screw everything up. Just do it like that. Everything will be fine. Well, there's been a lot of drive-by media coverage of the immigration raids in 6 states over the weekend. There are two narratives. First, there's the poor, innocent, persecuted, deported victims and sobbing relatives. Second, there's the supposed fear that's sweeping immigrant communities. But the reason why these illegal immigrants were deported hasn't been so easy to find in the media. Just one outlet, local CBS News branch, Southern California, did the unthinkable. They reported on the people who were picked up in their state. CBS LA EyeBallNews.com reports that of the 160 arrested, 150 of them had criminal histories. 5 others had been previously deported, snuck back in, or had final orders from the courts to be deported. Many of the deportees had prior felony convictions, some of them for serious and violent crimes. That includes assaults and sex crimes against the children. It's perfectly accurate to call most of these people bad hombres, since 95% of those deported are men. Now, in case you're wondering, these raids were not targeted at citizens from a specific country. Those who were sent packing are from a dozen countries. They came illegally, they stayed illegally, they behaved illegally, and for the last 8 years, while the rule of law was ignored, they were totally comfortable. Well, apparently those days are over. Bad hombres are being deported, and the rule of law has returned, just as someone told us would happen. Eight years ago, Guadalupe Garcia de Rios was arrested when authorities raided her Arizona workplace. She had used false identity documents. She later pled guilty to criminal impersonation, which is a felony. For months, she was held at a detention facility and then released. She was ordered to check in with ICE twice a year. This continued all through the Obama years. But during her latest ICE check-in, something different happened. She was detained. Last week, she was put in a van to be deported to her native Mexico. A local pro-illegal immigrant group got wind of the plan, and about 200 people showed up to protest. They banged on drums, they raised flags, they shouted "No papers, no fear," and "Let her go, set her free." Protesters surrounded the van carrying Ms. de Rios for several hours. One guy tied himself to a van tire. 7 protesters were arrested, and all of this was for naught. The protest group director broke it to the crowd. She has been deported. He called her one of the first victims of President Trump. ICE officials later confirmed Ms. de Rios had been removed to Mexico. But she's not a Trump victim. In fact, she's not a victim at all. Suddenly, and for a change, U.S. law is being followed. Ms. de Rios victimized herself years ago when she broke that law, and she was finally held accountable. Big whoop. A record 1,700-plus criminals were granted clemency released by Barack Obama. Now, one of those criminals is in trouble again. In October 2015, Obama commuted the life sentence of 68-year-old Robert Gill. Now, he'd been convicted of cocaine and heroin distribution in 1990. Obama claimed that he was a nonviolent offender who deserved to be set free. For a while, things looked up for Gill. He got a job as a paralegal at a criminal defense firm. Well, last week, Robert Gill allegedly met with somebody in a San Antonio parking lot where he picked up a backpack with a kilo of cocaine inside. When the police tried to pull him over, Gill led them on a high-speed chase. He crashed into another vehicle. Then he tried to flee again and was caught finally. Now, Obama said that he released these criminals back into society because they got a raw deal, because America's criminal justice system is unfair, and certain groups of people have been mass incarcerated. The truth is, Obama put our neighborhoods in danger when he released criminals back to prey on them, predictably, just as Obama put our troops in harm's way when he released terrorists out of Club Gitmo to rejoin the jihad, predictably. Here's another easy prediction. This Gill fella, he's just one of many who will eventually end up back in jail after further terrorizing people unnecessarily. CBS Eyeball News asks a question that must chill their hearts. Could Planned Parenthood survive without federal money? CBS says Planned Parenthood depends on taxpayers for 40% of their operating expenses. They've been living off the feds since 1970. That means living off of you. 6 years later, they started being oppressed when Congress said they couldn't use public money for abortions. And now poor Planned Parenthood's facing their biggest battles yet on many fronts. The cash they get from Obamacare is being threatened, and there are several bills in Congress to strip even more money away from them. CBS lists the services the organization provides, like cancer screenings and contraception, but somehow no mention of a Planned Parenthood service we learned about last year, selling harvested baby parts from their abortions. CBS does admit that Planned Parenthood gets large donations, like the $1 million gift from Facebook bigwig Sheryl Sandberg, but we're told it's not realistic to expect the organization to operate on just donations if taxpayer money dries up. And we're told it's not the job of charities to fund health care. Well, concerned journalists and activists should look at the Constitution. They'll find it's not the job of taxpayers to fund Planned Parenthood either. Which brings us back to their original question. Could Planned Parenthood survive without federal funds? Maybe, maybe not. Let's find out, shall we? I mean, they said that they want to start women bragging about the abortions they've had. Let's see how much money that can raise. This story's flying under the radar. You have not seen or heard it anywhere but from me. Over the weekend, the Daily Caller reported the sudden firing of 3 brothers who manage the computer systems for the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. The committee handles vital intelligence secrets, including those related to the war on terror. The 3 brothers, Abid, Jamal, and Imran Awan, are suspected of hacking into congressional computers they had no business touching. They worked for members of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, 2 Florida Democrat congresswomen, Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz and Lois Frankel, among their long list of clients. They also worked for Democrat Senator Tammy Duckworth and members of the Committee on Homeland Security. Others are being investigated. A total of 5 unnamed people are under a criminal investigation that began last year related to serious and potentially illegal violations of House IT policies. So while the Democrats and the liberal protesters are raising a stink because President Trump wants people coming here to be properly vetted, we learn that Abid, Jamal, and Imran Awan were fired for hacking into congressional computers, and they had access to national security secrets. Not a word of this in the drive-by media. They know how to keep Democrat secrets secret. And by the way, not one word about whether or not Putin's involved. Now, according to Politico, Republicans are facing anger at town hall meetings from Obamacare lovers. Near Sacramento, Republican California Congressman Tom McClintock was greeted by hundreds of protesters who had no interest in the town hall discussion. They were there to disrupt. They shouted him down. They were so vicious, the congressman needed a police escort to get him out of the event, while the disruptors screamed, "Resist and shame." Florida Congressman Gil Bilirakis faced a hostile crowd in Pinellas County. Politico says that Bilirakis got 2 hours of anger from his constituents, young, old, black, and white, who demanded he not repeal Obamacare. Now, these protests are not spontaneous. They're manufactured. They're part of a left-wing strategy. How do I know? Easy. Before he left office, Obama met with Democrats to scheme how they could sabotage Republicans in Obamacare. They didn't even bother to hide it. It was well reported by the drive-bys. They aren't even waiting until the Republicans announce their plans on Obamacare. These protesters just want to intimidate Republicans into doing nothing. So some bought and paid for protesters are being bussed in to disrupt town hall meetings. That's no reason for Republicans to go wobbly. After the November election, there are no more excuses. Zero. They've got to ignore the staged anger and do what they promised. Repeal Obamacare once and for all and get going on tax cuts now. So now we're seeing leftists take to the streets, vandalizing property, committing arson, assaulting people they assume are pro-Trump. What we have not seen are elected Democrats lecturing their unglued leftist base on the virtues of civility. We haven't seen condemnations in the drive-by media. In fact, media coverage downplays the violence. Meanwhile, liberal entertainers are ramping up their smash-mouth talk, At the big Pink March, the day after the inauguration, Madonna proudly announced her fantasy of wanting to blow up the White House. Next came liberal comedian Sarah Silverman. As the riots were underway in Berkeley, she tweeted, "Wake up and join the resistance. Once the military's with us, fascists get overthrown. Mad King Trump and his handlers go bye-bye." She was calling for a coup, sounds like, which will supposedly happen when the military comes to their senses and joins the anti-Trump brigades like Sarah Silverman. You know, it used to be when angry progressive women like Barbara Streisand and Cher pouted about election results, they threatened to leave the country. This generation isn't going anywhere. Instead, they want the military, which they despise, to join them in a coup. They want to blow up the White House. I guess it's time to say that these angry progressive gals, you've come a long way, baby, and you're heading straight downhill. I hope you're proud because you're making absolute fools of yourselves. In what's being called an extraordinary ruling, the state of New Jersey has overturned the will of voters who twice voted no on spending increases. Illegal immigration plays a role in this story. Now, here's what happened. Voters in New Jersey's Freehold borough voted down two referendums that would allow a school expansion to relieve overcrowding. Overcrowding caused by the growing number of children who are here illegally. That's part of the surge of illegal minors that Obama and Homeland Security encouraged, knowing it would cause this kind of upheaval. In the Freehold School District, we're talking 500 children in just 3 schools. Now, the issue was brought before an administrative law judge. He basically said, screw the will of the voters. We need to expand the education budget anyway. The state's education commissioner, David Hespy, agreed, so the two of them decided by themselves that $32 million will be spent to accommodate children here illegally. The pain's going to be spread out. New Jersey taxpayers will pick up 85% of this. The locals in Freehold will pick up the remaining 15% on top of the taxes they already pay. Now, these American citizens are being told that their laws don't matter, and even worse, that their votes now don't matter. Just like California, they'll pick up the costs of illegality like it or not. They have no voice, they have no vote, and they are not allowed to govern themselves when liberals are in charge. In December 2015, San Francisco resident Pedro Figueroa Zarceno reported his car stolen. When he came for the police report, Immigration and Customs Enforcement was notified because Pedro is here illegally from El Salvador. He was picked up. He spent 2 months in federal immigration detention. Now Pedro is suing San Francisco. His lawyer, Saria Hussein, says as a victim of crime, Pedro Figueroa was exactly the type of person who should have been protected by San Francisco's sanctuary ordinance, because Trump is promising mass deportations and threatening sanctuary cities, she says. Everyone in law enforcement must be held accountable. No, she does not see the irony in asking for law enforcement to be accountable. This woman's a liberal. Incidentally, Pedro was flagged because he had an outstanding warrant. He was supposed to be deported 10 years ago. He also has a drunk driving conviction. Now, he's demanding monetary damages. He also wants to force San Francisco police to file immigration paperwork stating that he was falsely imprisoned. This could make him eligible for a visa. Meanwhile, San Francisco is investigating the officers who handled Pedro's case to see if they should be punished. Now, unless something changes, Mr. Zarceno can assume that his lawsuit against the city will be resolved before immigration catches up with him again. They're backlogged over 2 years. The system needs fixing, not later, but right now. Well, Democrat senators are already coming unglued over the Trump administration's planned spending cuts. The Hill.com calculates that there could be $10 trillion of cuts over 10 years. Now, many of you don't believe that's possible, but if Trump really does cut the bloated federal budget, prepare for a tidal wave of hysteria from liberals unlike anything you have ever seen. If Planned Parenthood's defunded, the drive-by media is going to go apocalyptic. They will paint a picture of women dying in the streets, even though there are thousands of medical centers across the country to handle women's health issues. The drive-bys won't even mention that Planned Parenthood's business model includes harvesting baby parts for sale. Liberals are already stressing out that their precious public broadcasting dollars might be cut. Liberal broadcasters might have to put on their big boy pants and actually have to face a ratings book or real market competition in order to survive. And the left is organizing to spare the National Endowment for the Arts from any cuts. In the past, the NEA funded masterpieces like the anti-Christian work Piss Christ. It's a crucifix in a jar of urine from the artist Andres Serrano. Have a suggestion. Liberal celebrities like Meryl Streep, George Clooney, Ashley Judd could join forces with noted artists like Madonna and form a private endowment and pay for this crap yourselves. And then the left would never complain about spending cuts ever again, would they? And I know this doesn't have a prayer, but it should. On Inauguration Day, we saw violence and mayhem in the streets. Liberal protesters also blocked military members, the elderly, and families with children from entrances to the event. The Washington Post surprisingly reveals that the protesters who destroyed property on Inauguration Day were part of a well-organized group. They interviewed one who justified their actions as an attack on capitalism and corporate greed. The drive-by media reported that one of Trump's first acts was to remove Martin Luther King's bust from the Oval Office. Wrong. King's bust is still there. It was never moved. Winston Churchill's bust, the one Obama took out, has been returned. Saturday Night Live writer Katie Rich entered the gutter with a tweet targeting Trump's 10-year-old son Barron. She predicted he would become the country's first homeschool shooter. Barron is not homeschooled, by the way. And then there was the march. And like it's been multiple updates recounting the crude, angry, hateful vulgarity on display, like Ashley Judd, who read a poem claiming Donald Trump has wet dreams about his own daughter. But what better face for the vapid, poisonous event than the self-proclaimed material girl Madonna? Not only did she admit she harbors thoughts about blowing up the White House, which she's since recanted, she dropped F-bombs on live TV directed at those who disagree with her. Whenever you think liberals have sunk to the bottom, they sink lower. They go low and they keep going, and they are not the majority in mainstream.